Welcome back everyone to Packs and Picks. In the last video I opened our first 7 packs of Whispers from the Maze, and I have spent some time to build my first deck from Altered's third set. So let's get into it and see what I have built so far. So I'll start laying out the first version of the deck that I picked out. This isn't the final version, and we'll talk about some of the things that I saw and why I ultimately changed my mind from this as we go through. So we got a lot of 3-drops here, so try to get them all on screen. All right, so I went with a Bravos, Izmir, and Ortis build the first time around, and the reason I did that because when I was going through the card pool, there's a card that caught my eye. We've got 3 copies of Pastry Chef here. We've got a couple rares and 1 common. So the Pastry Chef, 3 cost, 2/4/2. What I really liked was his reserve ability. When you play another character, you gain a boost up to a max of 3. So I figured this is going to reward me for doing something I'm already doing already, playing characters. So it would be great to have this in my reserve and in my deck ultimately. So I like the Pastry Chef. So we had 2 in Bravos and we had 1 rare in Izmir. So I thought, okay, those are going to be their first 2 cards, or first 2 factions that are going to make up my sealed pool. And then from there, I wanted to add in the 3rd faction. I just liked the look of Ortis. There were a couple cards that drew me in this direction. This set cares a lot about the reserve, and so I really wanted to try to find ways to leverage that a lot. So getting cards into the reserve so those reserve abilities can start to trigger. So Ortis had the bug out bag, so just a small thing, but creates a brass bug, and then when played out of reserve, lets me resupply. Also, we've got the mess here, another permanent that lets us spend some accumulated counters to resupply. So this is going to help us get some more cards into our reserve. Now, one of the downsides of this deck is we don't have a lot of resupply or ways to get cards into reserve other than the natural way of getting cards in reserve. And then also, you'll notice we don't have a lot to do in the 1 and 2 drop slot. We're really heavily skewed at 3. So one of the big reasons why I pulled away from this color trio is because we don't have a lot going on here in the 1 and 2 drop slot. And so I felt like this deck was going to be a little bit too slow as we play things out. And so I wanted to find something with a little bit more to do with some cheaper cards, have a little more board presence in our expeditions early on, because you'll see that some of these things, like Cup of Sap, that's just giving characters boosts. We obviously have our 2 permanents here that aren't really affecting the expeditions too much in the 1 and 2 drop slots. So I wanted to lower our curve a little bit, see what else was in the pool, and so I'll show you what I ultimately am going to end up with here next. So I went back to the pool, looked at what we had on offer, and I noticed in Muna and Axiom we had a lot more going on in the 1 and 2 drop slot, and a lot more things that are going to impact the expeditions early on. So that was going to be the framework for the final deck that we were going to build. And I'll show you a little bit more of that now. All right, so we've got Muna and Axiom cards here. So right away you can see, even just with the 2 factions, we've got more going on here in this lower part of our curve, which I do like a little bit more. Lets us be more reliable in hitting those early turns of the game and having some impact on the board in the early turns of the game. So Muna and Axiom, one interesting thing about this, you'll see we've got three copies of Grand Bois. So 4 cost, 4/4/4. We can have our opponent draw a card. If we do, it will get anchored. It also has that support ability in reserve to gain boosts every turn. So this is something that's going to be gaining boosts. We can replay it from our reserve, and we'll see how good Grand Bois is. I wasn't sure how much I liked the idea of giving our opponent a card to give it anchored, but this could be something annoying for our opponent to have to deal with multiple turns in a row. And because we've got 3 copies, we can be pretty sure that we're going to draw it during the course of the game. So we got 3 of those here. We also have a couple permanents here in the refinery. So when a card leaves your reserve during afternoon, I gain a sap counter, and then we can spend sap counters to give characters in our reserve a boost. So once again, caring about the reserve. And then we also have the sap extractor over here where we can augment target card in play or in reserve so we can give it some more boosts. We don't necessarily have that baked in resupply that we did in the previous version of the deck, but because we have a smaller curve in the early part of the game, we're going to be getting more of those cards in reserve sooner. So we'll be able to hopefully start to leverage some of those reserve abilities sooner than we would in the previous version of the deck. So what's the third color, third faction that I wanted to add here? There's not a lot of interaction in this version of the deck, whereas Izmir in our previous version had a lot of spells and ways to interact with our opponent. So the third faction that I'm going to bring into this build is Izmir. So I'll grab some of those cards right now, and we'll see how it kind of nicely rounds out our curve and our deck. And we still get a little bit of what we liked from the previous build. All right, so this is what it looks like when we round it out with Izmir. Some things that I like about Izmir: we get 2 of these Scribbling Starfish, so this is a 1-drop in early play. And then when it goes into reserve right away, we see that we get that support ability going when we play spells, it gets boosts. So as opposed to the previous deck where we got to wait a little bit to get some of those characters into reserve for those support abilities to start triggering, Scribbling Starfish is going to start doing that from the very second turn of the game. We also get access to 2 copies of Metamorphosis, so we can discard a target character. They'll get a 2/2/2 in trade, but hopefully we're trading them down by removing their big boosted character or something like that. So we get 2 copies of Metamorphosis. We get 2 copies of Korgan Informant. I like this one because you can tell from this set that interacting with the reserve and getting counters on characters either in the reserve or in play is a big theme of Whispers of the Maze. So having the Korgan Informant be able to remove a couple counters will be able to change the math hopefully in our favor. So we got the Korgan Informant. And then we still get 1 copy of Pastry Chef. So we get a copy of Pastry Chef in our deck. So we still get a little bit of what pulled us in that original deck in this one as well. And then because we're playing Muna, we are going to get access to Rinnin Orchid. So we did open a Rinnin Orchid in our pool. And I like this because her ability says when your expedition moves forward, you draw a card, then put a card from your hand in reserve. So just baked into Rinnin Orchid, we get to access some of that reserve theme, the theme of playing with the reserve that's in Whispers of the Maze. So I like using Rinnin Orchid. That's going to get us a little bit more access to the reserve than in the previous deck. So there you got it. That's our Axiom, Muna, and Izmir build for our first sealed pool for Whispers from the Maze. Let me know what you think of this deck. Let me know what you thought of that first build, or did you see a different combination of factions that you would like to build from this sealed pool? Love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and stick around because we'll have more sealed pools and deck builds from Whispers of the Maze coming up. See you soon.